Right, the nucleus is a cellular control center. It's the brain of a cell. It has the chromatin, these are your DNA strands, it has the nucleolus in the middle, it has these pores right here. You can see the pores. And the pores will lead right out into the rough endoplasmic reticulum. That's where the proteins are made. Remember, a nucleus has all this DNA, and it's going to direct the manufacturing of proteins. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum, now that isn't going to have the ribosomes. It synthesizes lipids, so it actually has enzymes embedded right into it. And these enzymes can synthesize lipids. They can process toxins and drugs, so alcohol. And in fact, people who either abuse drugs or alcohol will have more smooth endoplasmic reticulum in their cells, and therefore need more and more of the drug because the endoplasmic reticulum processes it. The rough endoplasmic reticulum makes membranes and proteins. It's going to have the ribosomes embedded on it. It's going to be kind of connected to the nucleus. You're going to have the messenger RNA come right out, and it's going to be there making the proteins. It can make the membrane by just budding off. In the next slide, you'll see a nice example of it just budding off a piece of membrane. All right, so here we are. We're producing proteins that are excreted into membranes. And over here, you're going to see there it buds off and packages up the protein. Here you have the protein being created. These little green dots are sugars that are added to it before it gets packaged and sent on its way. And then the membrane will just bud off and that will get sent out. The Golgi apparatus, I can't help but think of, it's just the UPS guy, right? It is going to receive these sacs from the endoplasmic reticulum. They're going to contain mostly proteins. It'll modify them. It'll take them in on one side. So here's your loading dock. All right, and then it has to figure out where they are going. It's an enzyme to process this or that. It's got to be sent to a specific section. And then the transport vesicles will take it to the appropriate place. Lysosomes, they're kind of the catch-all garbage truck. They will digest whatever is in the cell that needs to be digested, whether it's nutrients taken in or whether it's old things in the cell that have died and need to be digested. They will take it in and digest it with enzymes so that you don't have a bunch of garbage floating around your cell. Lysosomes in white blood cells will destroy the bacteria that have been ingested. So what a white blood cell does is when it meets up an invading bacteria, it'll literally gobble it up. It'll surround it and ingest it, called phagocytosis. It'll literally take it inside of it. And what it does, and you don't want that living bacteria in your white blood cell because that would be bad. So the lysosome will come and digest and destroy that bacteria. Okay, lysosomes also recycle the damaged organelles. So organelles that die or for whatever reason aren't functioning, you don't want them, again, just floating around the cytoplasm. The lysosome comes in and will digest them and recycle them for take the materials apart and used for new things. You can see here there's a piece of a mitochondria fragment and there is a peroxisome fragment. Peroxisome's kind of like a lysosome, so that would be the membrane of it probably. So there's some damaged organelles there. Okay, abnormal lysosomes can cause some fatal diseases. One, I don't know, fairly well-known fatal disease is Tay-Sachs disease. And Tay-Sachs, fortunately, I guess, can be detected before people choose to have children. But um, it like destroys the nervous system. It's a pretty well, it's a fatal disease. It prevents the breakdown of lipids in the nerve cell membrane. So your lysosomes don't function properly and your nerves get destroyed. Okay, vacuoles function for general maintenance. They're sort of the catch-all. Plant cells contain a large central vacuole, and that has lysosomal and storage functions. What that means is that it'll have lysosomes. It'll also have just a place to store water or whatever it needs. Oftentimes in a plant, what it needs is water storage. It has to maintain a turgor is what it's called, but water pressure against the cell wall, and that central vacuole is a good place to store that water. All right, these little protists have these really cool little vacuoles. And if you look carefully, all right, so here's your vacuole, and then it's got these little spokes coming off of it, like spokes on a wheel. And these things live in the fresh water. And so what would happen is too much water would get inside of them, and they would pop. So this it's literally like a little water pump. It's going to absorb in water from the cell, and it pumps it to the outside of the cell, and it does that constantly, and that maintains a water level inside the cell that doesn't swell up the little organism there. Okay, so remember the endomembrane system. Endomembrane system is going to be the membranes, right? These are the ones that evolved from the folding of the original membrane. It's going to be your endoplasmic reticulum. It's going to be your Golgi apparatus. It'll be your vacuoles, your lysosomes, all the envelopes. These are membranes that originally folded in as the cell evolved and created these different organelles. Okay, chloroplast converts solar energy to chemical energy. Many of you know this is one of my favorite reactions because it's basically taking sunlight and making it into sugar. They are found in plants and some protists. They convert solar energy to chemical sugar basically. They have their own DNA and their own ribosomes, and that is probably because they evolved from a photoautotrope prokaryote years ago getting absorbed in, and they reproduce by binary fission, again a remnant probably from being this prokaryote that was absorbed in billions of years ago. Mitochondria also, remember, were probably a prokaryote that was very efficient at making energy. It can produce ATP quite efficiently, so there's probably a prokaryote billions of years ago that got absorbed into a cell. It also will reproduce by binary fission, kind of classic prokaryotic division there. It has its own DNA, so it's like a little alien invader in your cells, its own DNA, inherited always from the mother because it's the mother's egg that has the mitochondria. Okay, so you have a cytoskeleton that is the internal structure, holds things together in the cell. First you have what's called a microfilament, and they're made of globular actin subunits. They help with motor activity, so they help move things, your muscles. Over here we have an intermediate filament. These are fiber subunits, and they tend to anchor your organelles. And then you have microtubules. And these are kind of the freeways of the cell. Organelles will move on them. They will also help to anchor them, but they will move along the microtubule. All right, microfilaments of actin enable the cells to change shape and move. So those are your movement ones. Those for motor, for muscle movement. The intermediate filaments reinforce the cell and anchor your organelles. And then the microtubules, they give the cell rigidity and they provide anchor, but they also are literally like little freeways, what I said in the other slide. Literally little freeways where organelles can move up and down these microtubules. And microtubules, unlike our freeways, can be created and then destroyed and then recreated somewhere else. All right, cilia and flagella move when microtubules bend. When we talk about these microtubules, and we've talked about cilia and flagella before, and this local motor appendage, but how it works is it's working by these microtubules. So you have a flagella here, and then over here you'll have cilia, and they, all right, so here's your flagella over here. Here are the cilia, and they will wave, if this is in your respiratory tract to get rid of like snot or dust, they will actually do these waves where they push material in one direction. All right, so how do these flagella and cilia work? And the answer is it's by a cluster of microtubules. What you're going to have is you're going to have 2 center ones and then 9 pairs on the outside wrapped in a membrane. And this is going to be attached to something down here called a basal body, and it's structurally similar to this. And what they do is they walk along each other sort of diagonally, and these proteins actually kind of cross over diagonally, and it causes it to spin. So you can see here there's sort of this diagonal look to it. Okay, cell surfaces protect, support, and join cells. But they also interact with their environments, and they take signals through the cell. So we tend to think of it as very static, a cell surface. It is not. It is very dynamic. They not only give off signals to the outside world and to their neighboring cells, this is how cells communicate, but they will take in signals that tell them what to do. Maybe they need to produce more of a certain protein for whatever's going on in the body. Well, that information is passed through the surface of the cell. Okay, so plant cells are surrounded by a cell wall, and you might think that that prevents communication between cells, but a plant has a way of dealing with that. It has something called these little plasmodesmata, which are little pores where information can flow. But if you look carefully, it actually shares its cytoplasm with the neighboring cells. So not only are proteins and information going that way, but it can share its fluid. So when you water a plant, you don't just water half the plant wherever you pour it. It goes through the whole plant, the whole system that way. Animal cells are what's called an extracellular matrix. It's mostly glycoproteins, but it's kind of gooey. It kind of just is this extracellular matrix where they can pass information. Tight junctions can bind cells together. If you, like in the gut, you want something that's leak-proof or stuff isn't going to come out, you're going to use a tight junction. And then the gaps here allow substances and information to flow. Now, these anchoring junctions are for cells that get a workout, that either your heart or your muscle cells. Okay, eukaryotic organelles comprise 4 functional groups. So they're either going to be involved in manufacturing your proteins, your lipids, or they're going to be breaking down things. They're going to be making energy. That's obviously a really big one. Mitochondria make energy. Or they're going to be doing support, like your cytoskeleton and movement, the actin filaments, and communication between cells.